Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle Dyer, and welcome to Colorado Inside Out on this Friday, June the 28th. As we approach our nation's birthday next week, we look back to the day when the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776. And then there's also much focus on our future as Coloradans and Americans. This week's primary election shed some light on who Coloradans won in their state legislature and in Congress. And we all watched on Thursday night, or have seen the clips of, the two men who want to be our next president. All right, let's start by introducing everyone to the panel, because we have a lot to get to. We have Patty Calhoun, founder and editor of Westword; Eric Sonderman, columnist for Colorado Politics and the Denver and Colorado Springs Gazettes; Chris Rourke, consultant at Rourke Media; and Alton Dillard, media consultant with the Dillard Group, political analyst for 9 News, and former elections spokesperson for the city and county of Denver. Thank you all for joining us on this very important week. First off, we need to talk about what everybody is talking about, and that is the first debate this season, perhaps the only debate going forward, between President Biden and former President Trump. Patty, let's start with you.
It was not just watching a car wreck. It was watching a car wreck where more trucks kept coming up and running into the original wreck. Joe Biden, bless his heart, had no business being behind the wheel of anything. I'm not being ageist, as David so kindly pointed out just a few shows ago. I am the oldest person on this panel and have survived longer than Blinky the Clown, but Blinky the Clown would have done a better job in that debate last night. The Democrats did a disservice to Joe Biden's handlers by letting him be on the stage. If he had a cold and that was really the problem, he just should have stayed home. But he was meandering, he was disappointing. And Trump, who didn't do a good performance, but just by not doing a worse one, actually came out okay in this debate.
Not only was it a disservice, to use Patty's words, I'd go stronger than that. It was malpractice to suggest that this man is the man to guide our country, lead the free world for the next 4 years. And beyond malpractice, it is bordering on inhumane. There is no shame in being in decline. We all age at different rates. We all ultimately decline in different ways. To fool yourself or to fool the country is the shame. The shame does not belong to Joe Biden. Trump was last night who Trump always is. He's smarmy, he's evasive, he sends the fact checker dial off the meter on a minute by minute, sentence by sentence basis. But Donald Trump was not the story last night. Joe Biden was the story. He had one job last night, and it had nothing to do with substantive discussion of issues. His job last night was to show that he was up to the task and up to the occasion, and he failed that job.
Yeah, I saw a meme back in March that said the first party that chooses a new candidate wins. And I think the Democrats have a clear path to do that right now and possibly look like heroes in the end. I think Democrats were stunned for about 45 minutes before they started rolling out damage control. Kamala Harris defending the president's performance, saying, oh, he just got a slow start. Come on, she was arguing with the CNN commentator. This was not just a bad debate. That's what the dialogue was this morning, that this was just a bad debate. And that doesn't make, the president a bad candidate. I think we're all clear on what we saw last night. Now there's talk about Gavin Newsom potentially stepping in. We have not heard yet from Jared Polis, so this does impact Colorado. But clearly Democrats are in lockstep, holding a unified front until they can decide what to do. Maybe the GOP wants to take a lesson from that. But here we have a situation where the Democratic Party could look like heroes in a disastrous election.
And the president would, too, if he put the country before, right?
Yeah, and maybe that's his legacy. Thinking now of legacy. Doing what's right for the country.
Gavin Newsom was one of those people who also used the slow start term as well.
Yeah.
Alton.
Yeah, I've said it on this air many times that nobody does panic like the Democratic Party, and in this instance, it is certainly justified. The discussion of whether he had a cold or not, that whole first part, even from the time that Biden took the stage, I was with my mom and her husband, who between them are almost 200 years old, and they're like, uh-oh, we were literally holding on to each other like, what is getting ready to happen? Now, yes, Biden warmed up as things went on. You know, you need to get started a little earlier. And then my number one concern, and we were kind of texting about this a bit last night, are the moderators. We understand that they were not going to do live fact checking, but after the third time one of these candidates does not answer the question, you either need to cut it and move on or take 1 or 2 stabs at it. You can't give them 3 stabs.
Unlike other debates, though, the moderators are not the story on the day after, are they?
Correct.
No. Okay. Earlier this week, a little over 1 million Coloradans participated in our primary election. And in most contests, the candidate with the more extreme views was not who people wanted to be leading any longer. Eric, that is on both sides of the aisle as well.
It was a good night for moderation in both parties. It showed that there are moderate voices and a moderate center remaining in the state. The exception to that rule was Lauren Boebert, but that one was entirely predictable. Her victory, yes, her gambit paid off, but it's a testament to Republicans not being able to get out of their own way and clear the field so that she had a one-on-one race. She may well have lost that one-on-one race given the tenor of the evening. Dave Williams is the biggest loser of that evening and probably the biggest loser of this year. Not only, he didn't get beat, he got trounced, he got annihilated. We will now have to go forward in Congress and in the legislature without the likes of Dave Williams, Ron Hanks, Elizabeth Epps, Tim Hernandez, and continue on that list. And you know what? I think the Republic can endure.
Okay. Chris, 14 of the 18 endorsed candidates in the Colorado primary that Dave Williams' party endorsed did not fare well. I don't think Lauren Boebert needed that endorsement.
No, she's been able to kind of separate herself from that. There are calls now for Dave Williams to step down or be removed, and no surprise there. Here's what needs to happen, though. The Republican Party needs to determine what the infrastructure is going to look like. Because you can remove Dave Williams, but with the current Central Committee, you're likely to get somebody who may be just as bad. So there needs to be a change in the people that are part of the Central Committee. We need to see more, not necessarily moderation on policy, but some common sense. Maybe moderation is that common sense piece where we're not dealing with what we dealt with Dave Williams ahead of time, you know, during Pride Month and things like that. There's been some talk, I was at some watch parties, there was even talk of maybe this is the next step for Deb Flora. She readily in her defeat speech said that, you know, the election system is broken and she has some desire to want to fix it. Who knows what could happen?
Alton.
Well, as someone who was in elections for years, I'm curious what she means there. Yeah, the whole Williams thing was fascinating. And, you know, again, this is a person who sued to have his name on the ballot as Dave Let's Go Brandon Williams. And I'm never going to let people forget that. So the thing that I'm sort of paying attention to when it comes to that whole issue is, yes, the Central Committee finally said, okay, enough's enough. But is it because of damage to the brand or not believing what he was saying? See, this is still Colorado, so I still am curious about that. Bringing it down also to the sort of local level, you know, I live in House District 6, so I was getting tons of mailers in the race between Camacho and Epps. And so we talk about how the word progressive gets tossed around. Even in one of his last mailers was saying that he was the progressive choice. So to echo what Eric and the panel are saying here, it looks like we're heading back towards at least a reasonable middle where people can debate issues, and maybe we'll start moving away from the culture wars a little bit.
Hope so.
Well, I would like Chris to tell me who is worse than Dave Williams. Who could be worse? Satan? And I don't
never know.
Well, would the Colorado Republican Party have endorsed Satan? Maybe. That was the greatest moment, though, during the primary, to watch him go down, because his whole race had been so cynical that he used the party committee, the party in such bad ways, used money, did the unprecedented endorsements. So Dave Williams deserved to go, and here's what I liked seeing, was that Coloradans are independent enough, even if they have party affiliations, to actually vote for common sense or principle, or maybe just because he was as bad as Satan. But still, we saw a lot of people make good choices on the primary night, and you compare the fact that voters were active and had choices to make and made them to last night's display where you don't see that you have any choices. Tuesday night was exciting for Colorado. Last night was disappointing for the country.
All right, let's take a deep dive now into the congressional races. We talked a little bit about Lauren Boebert, but let's talk about how these races are now shaping up for the general election in November. I'll start with you, Chris.
Okay, but first I want to clarify that unless there's a change in the GOP leadership, we're likely to get something very similar to Dave Williams. So there needs to be a fundamental change in the GOP leadership to be able to make those decisions and choose a leader. Yeah, the congressional races were really interesting. Of course, Lauren Boebert won as expected. Tricia Calvarisi beat Ike McCorkle on the Democrat side. I think that sets up a very interesting general election race in CD4. It's likely Boebert will win, but I think there's going to be some interesting aspects that come out. Tricia Calvarisi, although a Democrat and very liberal, speaks moderation. She speaks community and family and values and service. So some interesting things there. There's been talk about money influencing races, dark money defeating candidates, and yet on the Western Slope, Jeff Hurd had a lot of money spent against him, and yet he prevailed at the end of the night. So yeah, a lot of interesting takeaways from the congressional races.
Alden.
Yeah, concurring. Boebert's a lock in the fourth, so let's just go ahead and get that on the table. And this is a situation where you say don't hate the player, hate the game. That was actually a very shrewd move on her part. She is setting herself up for like a Diana DeGette-like run in that congressional district. She's in her upper 30s. She's probably, she can serve 28, 30, 35 years, whatever the case is now. And then also keep in mind that by moving out of her former district, she doesn't have to deal with the pesky limousine liberals in Pitkin County. So if you think of how the 4th Congressional District is drawn now and listening to her victory speech, which spilled over into Christian nationalism, that's going to play in the Eastern Plains. This is still Colorado. I love me some Colorado, but as they say, once you're outside of Denver, you are in Colorado. The 8th is going to be a toss-up. The 3rd is definitely going to be interesting, and I think with the two people running there, Hurd's going to have a very good chance now. So the thing that to keep an eye on after November is the fact that due to contraction in the media, there's no coverage of our congressional delegation anymore. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they do going forward.
Okay. Hurd's chances are up, even though Frisch still has all that money.
Yes.
Yes. Patty.
As we've seen, money is not the only deciding factor. Boebert, she could be heading to a Blinky-like run in Congress. That's true. But I also have to say, I was driving out on the plains last week, and there are people there who are not going to buy it. Even if they're lifelong Republicans, they still have the carpetbagger feel. She still doesn't know anything about ranching and farming, water, the things that is really everything they need to survive out on the Eastern Plains. So we may or may not see if Calvarisi can knock into that at all just by talking smart, talking common sense, not talking blood of the Lord and everything else that Lauren Boebert was spewing on Tuesday night. But that's going to be the race, obviously, to watch. I think the 5th will be fascinating, but Crank's got it. The 8th will be really interesting. I do think that Caraveo will keep that seat, but it's not going to be easy. That's going to be a real fight. It's just going to be a wild 4 months.
Eric.
I'm going to throw some cold water here. I think it's not going to be all that competitive, a general election, with 1 or 2 exceptions. The attention this fall, if we dial ahead 3 months, obviously it's on the presidential race, even though Colorado's not in play, and it's going to be on ballot issues. There are no statewide races up this year. Neither senator is up for re-election. Governor, Attorney General, all those other secondary offices, they wait another 2 years here. I think the congressional lineup is largely set with the exception of the 8th Congressional District, which was designed to be a super ultra competitive district, and it is, and it remains that. Caraveo versus Gabe Evans, I think the huge advantage goes to the incumbent with the money, et cetera, particularly in the tone of this year. You would have to bet that Caraveo survives this, but that district's always going to be a competitive district. Beyond that, Jeff Hurd, I don't care about Adam Frisch's money. That money only came into play against an extremist like a Boebert type. Jeff Hurd will coast to that victory. Jeff Crank in Colorado Springs will coast to victory. The incumbent Democrats, DeGette, Neguse, Crow, Pedersen will coast to victory. This will be about ballot issues and the presidential race.
And so we promise, team, to tell everybody what's going on with these initiatives as they get secured for the ballot, okay? So let everyone know exactly how long our ballot will be and what's on it. All right. The U.S. Supreme Court has decided on some rulings. Today was the original deadline to have all the rulings from this past year posted, but the court has now extended into next week. And I will start with you, Alton.
Yeah. As a communications person, the leaks that keep coming out of the Supreme Court are baffling to me. How stuff's starting to get out ahead. That's happened twice now in some pretty major cases. But one of the rulings that did come down was the one upholding the ability of cities to continue to have camping bans. So to localize it, I'm really now keeping an eye on Denver's approach, which is housing first, which means move the open air drug use behind closed doors, versus the Aurora approach, which is a tough love approach, and wanting to see which one of those prevails. And then also, this is sort of, again, another warning shot to Democrats because we're still waiting on the rulings on presidential immunity. Democrats better quit waiting on the judicial system to be their GOTV mechanism. Donald Trump, convictions or not, is not going anywhere. And if they don't start engaging young voters, voters of color, the people who say we have no choice, so we're sitting it out, they're going to be circling the drain with quickness.
Patty.
The camping ban decision is going to be fascinating in Colorado because you have Aurora, which just said we're not even getting 72 hours notice. We're just going to sweep whenever we want to, and it looks like they were going to be protected in that. Meanwhile, Denver still has a federal order that says you have to give 7 days advance notice unless it's a public health risk, in which it's cut down shorter. So that is going to be an ongoing issue, although certainly Mike Johnston's administration has shown they are more than willing to figure out ways to sweep if they think it's the right thing to do. And I will say, if you're downtown now, there's still the narrative that downtown is just full of people lying on the sidewalks. That's not the case. If you haven't been to downtown lately, go out on the 4th of July, go watch the fireworks, and you will see that the streets of Denver are pretty clear.
Mm-hmm. All right, Eric.
These rulings are fascinating. They're somewhat across the board. The camping ban ruling just came down within an hour or so of us taping the show. I haven't yet had a chance to read it in detail, but my instinct is that the conservative majority on this court got it right, and that the liberal minority in dissent is off base, not on all issues, but on this particular. Localities around the country ought to have the ability to take their own individual approach. And I believe in some cases that includes camping bans. That's clearly the will in Denver, but 80% majority last time it went to the ballot. I'm not suggesting it is the solution in all cases, but it should be in the toolkit and in the arsenal in some cases. This is a balance of rights. Yes, the homeless certainly have rights, but business owners and citizens and others have rights too, and localities should be able to navigate and balance that balance of rights.
Okay. And Chris.
Yeah, Eric's right. And I don't know that much changes in Aurora or Denver with this rulings and its application. Just because you have the tool in the toolbox doesn't necessarily mean you're going to use it. I agree with Alton completely. The leaks are very concerning. We've never figured out who, or at least it's not publicly known, who was responsible for the Roe v. Wade leak. That should have been tracked down. And now we have another case of it. Now, my understanding is it was a clerical error, but still.
It was a draft.
And a big one. A big
A
error.
big one. And you cannot do that at this level of the game, so that needs to be fixed.
That was so surprising, don't you think? And it just, of all weeks, for that to happen, being at 2 years to the week.
Same topic.
Same topic.
But let us point out, journalists love leaks. If you have some, send them my way.
All right.
Shame on you, Patty.
All right, now we're at the time of the show where we look back at some of the highs and lows of this week. There were plenty of both this week. We'll end on a high note, so let's start on something negative.
Let me return to
Shane.
last night.
Okay.
That people are so focused on Biden. We almost gave Trump a pass, and he should not get one. His lies throughout the debate were appalling, but none more appalling than his response on the question about January 6th. Let's remember that brave Coloradans tried to keep him off the ballot. A Colorado judge found that he had indeed incited an insurrection. The Colorado Supreme Court upheld that. Let's remember the role Colorado had in this.
Eric?
So you're telling me Donald Trump doesn't always tell the truth?
Shock.
I guess there's a news flash in that. My disgrace goes to Dave Williams. We've talked about him on the show. As long as he remains in public life, he will be a frequent disgrace around this table. He should retire from public life, not wholly unlike Joe Biden, even though he's only half his age. And in particular note, the way he tried to inflame passions, Dave Williams, around the Pride Parade, and just with this mean-spirited attack on gay rights and gay people generally, what it's telling to me is that's what it took for a whole lot of Republicans to finally say enough, which tells you that there's been a whole lot of movement in that party in the right direction on this issue, and he's the one who's out of step.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I've been Debbie Downer, so I'm going to have a lighter negative of the week. Apparently there's something in Colorado that I've never known about before, and that's called budworms. And I have planted my balcony with beautiful petunias and flowers and all kinds of things, and all of a sudden, in one night, my petunias got all chewed down. Come to find out, I have these little caterpillars. So I texted Krista Kafer for some, advice on organic, measures to take, but budworms, terrible.
Okay, all right. Sorry.
Thanks.
And Milo is something that I still want to turn into an actual topic one day, and it has to do with Denver's decision to let people drive around with no plates on their car or 2021 temp tags because they're trying to eliminate low-level traffic stops. I'm a black man. I understand the inequities in the criminal justice system. I understand that traffic stops can be point of entry into the criminal justice system, but we talk about, well, we can't get our kids controlled. And it's like, well, because we're removing anything resembling consequence from our society. There's a part of me that says I can just go ahead and save my $700 a year and take my chances, but I'm into the other counties that surround Denver that are enforcing expired tags and no tags.
All right. Let's talk about something positive, please.
When you are downtown this weekend having fun, seeing that the streets are clear, go to the 16th Street Mall between Larimer and Lawrence and marvel at the fact that one block is open. One block of that endless project is done. And so just look at it and think, only another year till the rest is done.
A year. Knock on wood. All right.
How about the name Jeff? We have two likely new congresspeople in this state on the Republican Party, Jeff Hurd, Jeff Crank. If that party is going to get back in the game and become a competitive force in this state and a viable force, and we would all benefit from a more vibrant two-party system, it will be led by people like Jeff Crank and Jeff Hurd.
Okay.
So after going to these watch parties primary night, my truck broke down and I had to leave it in Castle Rock. And a man who's a friend of a friend drove me all the way back to the Denver Metro. His name's Kevin McHugh. Turns out he's running for town council in Castle Rock. Now, this isn't a political endorsement, but it is an endorsement of him as a human being, and we need good people in office. So that was something, the silver lining to the end of primary night for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Between the petunias and your truck, I'm sorry you've had a tough week.
I know.
Alton.
My high as a basketball coach is Colorado's turning into a bit of a hoops mecca. Let's look at the NBA draft. From CU, Cody Williams, Devin Carter, who actually went to college at Providence, actually played at George Washington and Cherry Creek. Dalton Connect, he went from Prairie View High School to junior college to the University of Northern Colorado, go Bears, and then on to Tennessee and got drafted. And then also Tristan Da Silva and KJ Simpson from CU went in the NBA draft.
It's awesome, isn't it? And
Yes.
I figured you would say something, go Bears. Yeah, that's a great story. My positive is that it's Friday going into a holiday week at a time to get together with our friends and family, and those times are what matters most, everyone. And if you need some direction as to where to go, I say head up the hills like I did last weekend to hike a bunch of trails, listen to the birds, and discover new wildflowers. This city girl took way too long to get back up into the mountains, and boy, was it worth it. Colorado, you're amazing and spectacular, and no matter what happens during our day-to-day, we are so graced with the most glorious getaway not that far from our front doors, where we can just go and breathe. Thank you, Insiders, for joining us on such an important week for Colorado and our country. Thank you for being engaged and watching or listening to our podcast on Spotify and Apple. Happy 4th of July, everyone. I'm Kyle Dyer. I will see you next week here on PBS 12.
PBS 12 believes in the power of original, local programming. Help us bring more shows, like the one you just watched, by donating at pbs12.org/program support today.